Thanks for joining us. Today is the first in a series of In Conversations that's been produced and curated by participants this year's East Meets West Masterclass program. The Masterclass program is organised by Grain Projects, who I work for. My name's Stephen, by the way, and Format Festival and Quad in Derby. The programme is supported by Arts Council England, along with Birmingham City University, Derby University, and also this year the New Art Gallery Walsall. As I said, this is the first in a series of conversations with each of the participants. That's going to be happening across the next few weeks. Some are going to be led by myself, and some are going to be led by Neve and Laura, who are our colleagues at Format. But to get to this evening's main man, Andy Pilsbury. Thank you, Andy. How are you?
Yeah, good. Very good. Yeah, it might be the first and last of these.
It could be for both of us. It could be for both. I'll just, to everyone who might not be aware of Andy's work, I'm just going to give a short introduction to Andy and his practice, and then we're going to get into some conversations about Andy's older work and also, excitingly, a new book dummy that he's been producing over the past couple of months. But to introduce Andy properly, Andy Pilsbury is a photographer whose particular interest is the presentation of American culture within the UK. Drawn to communities, individuals and subcultures, he forms wider narratives based on his own experience and notable historic and contemporary themes. His book dummy, titled The Flesh and the Fantasy, which we're going to talk at in length today, is made up of 5 stories connected by the export of American culture and its manifestation by outsiders in the UK. Interwoven with dreams and reality, or flesh and fantasy, he presents a multi-layered narrative of symbolism, ideology and culture that journey through different genres and iconic subcultures, commenting on both historic and contemporary themes. Alongside Andy's personal work and commission projects, he works as a senior photography technician at Birmingham City University, educating students in photography. He's also commercially represented by the Lisa Pritchard Agency. So there we have it, Andy Pilsbury.
I like that.
So Andy, just to kind of kick us off and get us going, do you want to just give everyone a bit of background to you, how you first kind of got interested in photography, what appealed to you, and kind of a brief summary of how you are where you are now?
Yeah. So I guess my photography journey started at college. So I took a BTEC national diploma at Stafford College, and that was really good. Like had a really good grounding. It was an analog based course, and yeah, it was kind of, I chose photography on a whim actually, because like my main interest was illustration, and I wanted to choose illustration for my subject, but the course just wasn't right for me really. So I had a couple of friends who were doing photography, so I just took a punt at it really, and I took to it, pretty well, and it was a really enjoyable experience at college level. And after that, I had a year out just to sort of figure things out and decide what I want to do, and then decided to go to uni, so to further my education with photography. So I ended up taking a course at Birmingham City University, which was University of Central England back then, I think, and it was the BA Visual Communication course, which had a photography school embedded in it. So did my degree there and started to sort of build my portfolio, and then left the course without any idea really on how to make money. So I had a bit of a portfolio, but I didn't have any idea on how to make money from that really. So I kind of started from the bottom in that sense, just doing small jobs, and ended up doing quite a lot of event photography for a nightclub, and that was quite an interesting period. And then I decided I'd had enough of that, and it wasn't really going anywhere, to be honest. So I'd booked a one-way ticket to to go to India. So I just thought, just run away. So that week that I booked the ticket, I got a call off Nathan Troman, who was actually the acting head of photography at Birmingham City University, and he asked me to come and do some help with the final shows. So I took him up on that offer and bailed on the travelling option. So yeah, ended up doing on a bit of a temporary contract with the university, just helping out, and that led to a technician's role. And yeah, from there, I've been there since, and I've just been building my sort of my own portfolio, my commercial portfolio as well. That's obviously led on rather recently to representation with Lisa Pritchard down in London for my commercial work. And yeah, I've just been shooting my own sort of personal projects along the way, really. So just chipping away, building that portfolio. So that's where I'm at. So kind of like fingers in lots of different pies, the technician's work, commercial bits and bobs, and then yeah, my own practice really.
Right.
So yeah.
Great. And where, you're going to show everyone some of your work shortly, but I'm just interested in where does the kind of fascination and the kind of, the concentration in your work come from for American culture? Where does that, is that from your childhood? Is that, where's your kind of fascination of American culture come from?
Yeah, I think there's probably a mixture really. I've been trying to sort of figure this out along the way, and I think it's just a mixture of things really. Like having explored the different sort of subcultures that I've been working with and the kind of subjects that I've been photographing, it's kind of it's the presence of Americana or the influence of it is really everywhere. It's on varying different levels. So I think even from when I was a child, so watching simply playing cowboys and Indians, watching all the films.
Yeah.
Done a couple of I've done a couple of big trips to America as well, which I think really have kind of influenced my perspective. I kind of was really seduced when I went away to America, to the kind of the landscapes and just the vastness of it all. And I found it is a very seductive place in some sense, really. So there's film, music, it's kind of an ongoing thing, really. But I think when I started work, when I started photographing around the kind of the Americana topic, I guess, was the first project which I started working on, which was Still Taking Care of Business, which is about the Elvis tribute acts in the UK. So that was probably like the initial big push into making work around the subject. Yeah.
Cool. And so, I mean, that series is amazing, and I know you're going to show a few bits and things, but if people haven't seen that series of Andy's, I do recommend going onto his website to have a proper look through. So since doing the project on Elvis, on the impersonators, that's kind of, as you said, kickstarted a number of projects from cowboys. You photographed British cowboys, you photographed people who attend kind of bulldog bashes. I mean, how do you go about researching? Where do you find these things? Where do you end up on the internet to meet some of these people? How have you gone about kind of researching and looking at these things further?
Well, a number of ways, I guess. Like there's been a number. So the Elvis work, I think I came across that project, or it sparked an idea to do that project when I was reading the Birmingham Mail, and there was a feature in the Birmingham Mail about the European Elvis competition, which happens at Hilton in Birmingham. So I started reading that and just thought it's got to be quite interesting if it's such a sort of a high grade competition, and they're putting it on at the Hilton in Birmingham. I thought there would be an interesting sort of opportunity for photography there. With that project in particular, I was kind of interested initially, not with the rankings first, always the winner in that instance, but I was interested in the runners up, so the people who couldn't quite get to the top spot of Elvis impersonation. So, and then from there, I would research I would stalk on Facebook. I'd look for different, forums or Elvis sort of impersonators. I'd speak to people, see if they had any connections. I think once you start digging, it really kind of does open up the gates, really, and a lot of opportunity can happen if you just start looking, really. With the cowboy stuff, well, with Brian Sinnott, who is the Cotswold cowboy, as I call him, he actually, when I moved to Cheltenham a couple of years ago, I came across Brian because Cheltenham's got a really large equestrian scene with the races and stuff. So it wasn't actually that hard to find Brian. I found him. I think I've just found him on the internet, just doing a search around me for horse trainers, and it turned out that Brian was a horse. He trains horse riders in the American posture as opposed to the British technique. So I arranged a meeting with Brian, and then our relationship started from there. Bulldog Bash, which is about the UK motorbike scene, I just discovered that through. I've got an interest in motorbikes, and it's been on my radar for quite some time, and I just hadn't got around to going to the festival. So went to the festival, photographed that for a couple of years. That then led on. So last year I met another guy called Brent, who I've started a new project on as well. So all these opportunities just kind of have been sort of presenting themselves fairly easily, actually. The other stuff, so the reenactment projects and the other kind of broader project which I'm working on, that's through the kind of just the Western scene in the UK. I mean, if you do a Google search on it, it brings up loads of stuff, and there's loads of Facebook sort of groups, and just lots of Facebook stalking. There's a lot of that, really.
Good, like all good projects.
Yeah.
I mean, do you want to just start to show perhaps a couple of images that you've got? We can start to talk about. About them, because it's such a visual subject matter, and as you said, American culture permeates throughout our society here, from the way people dress to what music they listen to.
It's a mixture of things, it goes from people who are just interested in it from a visual point of view, but then there are people who become more connected with the work, with the kind of the themes and ideas. They get into the politics of things, and it really varies, really. So this work which I'm showing is quite difficult. I'm trying to balance this.
You're doing a good job.
This is a few images from Bulldog Bash, which is the project which looks into the kind of the UK motorbike scene. And I guess the connection with America is, the scene originated from America, and it was a kind of a post-war cultural movement, I guess, in response to the American dream, which was, that's what was really prevalent at the time. People were into the sort of white picket fence, the getting the family, the job, the kind of all of this. And it was built, the motorbike club scene was built on, war veterans returning home and just really not wanting to conform to, those ideals. So they kind of just did what they wanted to do. And it was a rebellion in some way. So they started to form their clubs, and they started to form their own sort of rules and regulations and almost code of conduct, really, which then led on to the development of the club culture and gangs, really. So this festival in Stratford, it no longer, it doesn't happen anymore, but it's run by the Hells Angels. So
Okay.
they're kind of like one of the biggest groups which originated from San Francisco. Between those and the Outlaws, they're probably the biggest clubs in the world, I'd imagine. So this is a festival that they put on for quite some years, but it sadly came to an end recently. So yeah, that's some of the Bulldog Bash stuff.
Great. And just talk us through your kind of themes throughout all your work and the way you go about photographing people and approaching people. How do you there are some pretty intimidating looking people. I'm sure they're very nice, but how do you go about your process as a photographer in that space? How do you approach? Because lots of people feel, want to take portraits, but are nervous to approach people. How do you kind of get over that? And why for you is that the best way of kind of working in that kind of almost by chance that you're coming across these kind of interesting people? Obviously, you're putting yourself in those places, but
portrait, when I started out, I was like, I always wanted to be, photographing people, but I was too shy. I couldn't do it. And I think it was at some point when I was away traveling at some point when I used that as an opportunity to kind of make the effort and make the leap to photographing people. And I still get really nervous now, photographing some individuals. I mean, some of the guys at the Bulldog Bash or the motorbike rallies, they are pretty gnarly people. And so, once I got over that initial kind of like fear of things, it did become a bit easier. And I found that if you photograph people on the street, like sometimes I will, depending on what I'm working on it, if I do see somebody, I will force myself to do it, even if I don't want to approach them or don't feel confident. I think you can learn a lot from photographing people just off the cuff on the street. And I think you have a very short amount of time to respond to them. And I think that, being able to get across who you are and what you want to do in a very short period of time, and, coming across as just like a nice guy is, that's half the battle won. And then, with the Bulldog Bash stuff, I mean, they're kind of, I mean, lots of the Hells Angels were turning me away because they don't appreciate, cameras being thrust in their face. They're very cautious of anybody with camera or media and things like that. So a lot of them were just telling me to, just to do one. So I would focus, the kind of the guys around the sort of the fringes and stuff, which they were fine. I mean, people, I think people at the Western events and any most sort of social gatherings or kind of cultural gatherings where there's an event going on, I think people are like really like receptive of being photographed because it's, you're kind of not posing a threat. They're there, they want to, portray who they are as people just by being by being at the event. And I think it's a mixture really. A lot of people, they can turn you down. A lot of them can say yes straight away, get a portrait. So it depends really.
Cool. And I think there's something you just mentioned there about people kind of in the other projects as well as this, that people performing and almost want, American culture is about being on TV, isn't it? It's about, those 10 minutes of fame. It's about, that dream. And I think, there's a performance within the kind of participants of what they're doing. And I suppose that kind of brings us on a little bit to the title of your book, Dummy, The Flesh and the Fantasy. Do you want to do you want to give us a kind of, I know we've kind of talked a little bit around it, but do you want to kind of talk about where you are with the process of that project, and yeah, if you've got any other images that are kind of going towards that,
Yeah,
show us those.
I guess that the project came out of the masterclass, didn't it? So during the masterclass, you know, we were invited to bring along work that we'd been working on or currently were making work with, and yeah, I think you know, I mean, up until the masterclass, I haven't really shown anybody any work really for a long time, and I'd just been sat on all of these projects really. So I just bought a stack of my work prints and then just covered the table in all of these projects. And, you know, through the crits and the discussions with the groups and the, you know, photographers and artists, it was, you know, we started, you know, pull together the commonality between all of these projects. And there were these linking themes which brought it all together. And then, you know, the project developed out of that combination really. So, yeah, so I guess, I mean, it's unfortunate because we hit the print button last week, and I was kind of hoping to have something to show you guys in terms of the actual the dummy itself, but it's at the printer, so unfortunately I can't. But I can show you some more of the work prints that
that'd be great.
Build up the project really. So this stuff, which I'll show you now, is about the reenactment community or society, particularly the Western interpretation or the Wild West interpretation of the reenactment society. So let me show you some of this stuff. So these guys, they you know, they're really enthusiasts of the, you know, the period in history, the kind of the frontier period, you know, cowboys and Native American periods. And what they would do is they will, depending if it's an event or they might be involved with TV or drama or some sort of historic film reenactment, they will come and they will, you know, set up their kind of lodgings and sort of, you know, sleeping quarters, and then they'll spend a long weekend, and they will, you know, sort of try and replicate as much as possible, you know, the lives and kind of experience that the people on the frontiers would have, you know, kind of had themselves. So it's a traveling history sort of comment really, but the work this part of the book is based around Buffalo Bill, who is a character. He's a character who was involved in the original kind of import of ideas of the Wild West to the UK. So back in 1887, he was invited to the Queen's Jubilee to bring his kind of travelling history and travelling performance show. So it was really the first time ever that the UK would have experienced, you know, sort of live visual things like this. And they did various different reenactments. So they would reenact war skirmishes between, you know, the cowboys and the Native Americans. They brought buffalo with them, so they would be doing kind of, you know, sort of live kind of roundups of the buffalo, and yeah, a mixture of things really. So that's some of the reenactment stuff that is involved in the flesh and the fantasy, and you can obviously see that it's, you know, they live this kind of you know, depiction of history, and it's part of their reality, but it's on the other hand, it's really not. Their day to day, you know, they have regular jobs and they do regular things, but it's more of a hobby and a society that they're involved with really. So
and I think, you know, what we have to remember that all of this is, all the pictures are taken here in the UK, aren't they?
Yeah, all of them are. Yeah, so that's that's an interesting thing. Like I try and like with the work, I try and kind of keep the audience guessing because I've had a lot of comments, thinking that the work's been shot in the States or so I kind of like that crossover. Really, you have to look a bit further into the images, delve a bit deeper. I can show you some of this stuff, which is so this is Brian, who I mentioned earlier, and this project is actually centered around Brian. So Brian's as I mentioned, he's the American horse trainer, and when I met him, he was kind of really interested in helping out with the photography, and shortly after meeting him, he wrote me a bit of text, which is what this body of work is based around, which is it's a combination of his kind of sort of viewpoints and perspectives on America and how it's influenced him and his lifestyle, really. So that text, A Memorandum to the Cowboy Way, is really what this project is kind of based around. And it's, all of these projects are still kind of work in progress as well, apart from the Elvis stuff. So I'm kind of still chipping away at them. But this stuff really deals with the kind of the American horse riding scene in the UK and the competition as well that comes along with it. So.
And do you see these? They all come together. These different projects of the Elvis, the Cowboys, the Bulldog Bash, the kind of reenactors. Do you see them as kind of separate projects within this overall kind of the flesh and the fantasy title, or do you view them as kind of as a whole? Oh, can you hear me?
Breaking up. Oh,
can you hear me?
Sorry, I think the internet was gone.
That's
yeah, got you. Yes, when we. Oh God.
I was just saying, do you see these kind of separate projects as a whole, or that come under the flesh and the fantasy title, or do you see them as kind of separate projects still?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I guess when I brought the work to the masterclass, I was kind of very sort of fixed on them being their own projects in themselves. So, the process of the masterclass and speaking with some friends about the work and yourselves, we kind of could see the common themes that went throughout the work. It did become evident that the work could exist intertwined, and then when we started making making the dummy book, I think I initially started off doing a chapter-based edit, which was Bulldog Bash, Real Cowboys Know How to Kiss, Elvis work, and then it soon became evident that it just felt too rigid. Really, it was kind of very, it was quite static, and it didn't really work that well for the photo book, really. So then we moved on to like mixing up the images and sort of blending the stories, really. And I think it's really kind of benefited the end product. So it was iteration after iteration, and we kept like going back to the kind of drawing board with the editing sequence. But I think it's worked out really well. And I must say, if Paul's listening, Paul Corcoran, I must say a big thank you to him, because he really helped me with the editing the sequence, and he really kind of helped me sort of see it as a kind of as one together. So yeah, shout out to him.
Great. And I think hopefully soon everyone will be able to see it. But yeah, I've been lucky to kind of see a couple of different edits of it, and I definitely think mixing the projects together, you get you get such a different kind of feel. It becomes even more kind of all-consuming, this idea of American culture, and also you start to kind of, rather than being kind of seen as these separate things, they become this all-inclusive thing. But also you start to get, at first this project could be read as quite, it's funny, it's like, oh haha, look at them dressed up as that. But actually there's some quite serious undertones, political undertones, and yes, social undertones, economic undertones to this project. And that definitely comes through much stronger with that edit. That's kind of, everything's intertwined a little bit more, and images start to play off each other, don't they? Just as we, sorry, go on.
It felt very kind of editorial in a way, kind of like bang bang, and it didn't have its full potential, I guess, structured in that way. So yeah.
No, it's good. And it's just a lesson, isn't it, of just, even when you've got great content to begin with, that you've got to just keep going at it to find that narrative that really works.
It was so stressful at times. Like, I thought I had it. I'd show Paul, and then it would just be like back to the drawing board on it and stuff.
That's what you need, though.
You need to do that, yeah. I think you need to kind of push through those boundaries. And the thing is, like, one of the most difficult thing is, like, we were having a conversation about it, and images that I'm really connected to and I think are really kind of strong, and they need to be in the book, like the bangers, the really strong, heavy hitting ones, to somebody else it just might not even mean anything to them. And then if it doesn't fit the kind of the rhythm and kind of overall sort of message and story of the book, then it needs to go. And cutting images or editing images out is really difficult. Yeah, it can be really tricky.
Yeah, definitely it is. And quite often the other thing I always find, within my own work, or when more so when I'm talking to other people about their work, is that we're so associated. If there was an incredible event, if like, one of the guys you met was like, oh, he was so funny, but the picture's like just average, it's very difficult for you as that person to kind of disconnect yourself from the experience of taking the picture, which could have been incredible, and what the project's all about in terms of the process of making. But yeah, for the viewer, sometimes that that they didn't experience that. They can't, they don't have that knowledge. So, but yeah, great. I mean, what's your hopes for the? So, the book dummy's getting printed, and are you speaking to a number of people, and the reviews at format, which is really exciting. What's your kind of hope for the the book long term, and is there any projects that you want to continue with it in this, or do you think this work is kind of finished? But what are the next steps for you?
I think it's kind of, it's a bit of a funny one really, because the projects which I'm sort of shooting on their own as their own entities, then they're not complete really. But in some ways, like, I see the Flesh and the Fantasy as a kind of an initial step towards completion. So, I mean, I've got a list as long as my arm of things I carry on shooting. So there's just a load of stuff that I want to carry on chipping away at, and just see where that kind of, those events and situations will take us. 'Cause, I can definitely see the work taking a bit more of a serious tone in terms of things that you did pick up on, the kind of the politics and economics of things. And I think that could be like a spin-off project from the Flesh and the Fantasy. But I think, just get it in front of as many people as possible, and then just go from there and see if it has legs, really, see if there's any momentum with it. I think that in terms of shooting any new work, because a lot of the projects are based, they're kind of event-based projects. Currently lockdown isn't allowing that sort of thing to happen. So, yeah, so there's going to be, it's probably going to be next year. I'm going to be picking up some of the flesh and fantasy stuff again. But I've got a really long list of things I want to tackle with this. There's loads of stuff out there. There's loads of stuff.
Yeah,
I
know. I know a couple of people have put in some questions, so I'm just going to go back to them. But if anyone else has any questions for Andy that you'd like me to read out, please. I think there was a question from Emily. Yeah. So this is from Emily. How do the people that you meet, the Elvis impersonators, and all the other kind of individuals you meet, how do they respond to the work? Have you shown them to them? I know some of the people that you're working with is much more intense and long term, and some people it's more fleeting experiences that we talked about. How do people react who are within those communities when they see the work?
It varies, I think, and I'm always, it depends really. So for example, the initial guy that I started shooting the Elvis with, Pat Byrne from Essex, I ended up doing a few portraits with him, and then I went down with a friend and we shot a film with him, and put loads of effort into it. It was like it was a fairly big slog to do the project, and I don't think he was overly keen with the outcome of it, but I think it was a really good film. You can't please everybody, I guess. Some people just don't. They're not even bothered about seeing the work. They're just like, get the portrait and then carry on, and they're not bothered about seeing it. Some of the time they can't see the work either because on the spot, because I shoot film for a lot of it, and obviously I won't be able to show them on the spot. But sometimes I have correspondence with them. Some of them they really like. Some of them they don't. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good point you just made, just about some people aren't bothered, and I think sometimes we forget, like when we're in this world, that we think everyone is going to be,
They don't care about me.
Yeah, they're just like, hey, you can take a picture of me. Yeah, that's fine. But yeah, I think that's is a good point for us to remember when we're making work, that to a lot of people, they can be indifferent about it. And I think, again, especially approaching people, I think that's quite a good, to a relaxing way to kind of think about it. We've got a question here from Mitchell. Do you find that your personal and commercial work inform each other, and if so, how?
I'd say yes, they do. Yeah, definitely. I think the commercial portfolio that I'm working on now, is definitely built on the kind of the style that I'm kind of working towards, really. I think it depends as well. Like if there's a commercial job, and if I can't quite fit my, if it just requires this X, and there's not much room or breathing space to put much of myself into it, then it just wouldn't happen that way. But I certainly think for the agency stuff, if you look at my physical portfolio now, or even the stuff on their website, there's a lot of the work which I've shown you today. There's a lot of it, they really love the cowboy stuff. I think clients, if they want to invest in you, then they're looking to get a taste of your style. They want your input, they want your sort of direction and stuff like that. So yeah, I definitely think they feed into one another, and where possible I try and keep them as coherent to one another as possible, really. If they're kind of two very different things, then it can be confusing for people if they come across you and they see that you've got one commercial arm and it's very stylized towards that, and then there's your own personal practice, which is something completely different. I think it can give mixed messages. So yeah, try keep it continuity.
Sure. And just while we're just on the kind of agency, so you're represented by Lisa Pritchard Agency, which is brilliant. As a future, yeah. Do you want to just talk about how that came about and kind of, how did you kind of get that?
So when I started off photography, I had a couple of wins with, I think I had like I won a Kentmere competition. I did like a black and white print or something. And this was years ago. And then since then I had no success with competitions. Not that I was entering, loads all the time, but I took Lisa Pritchard, they do a biannual competition where they do a call out for photographers to submit their work, and then you can, if you win, then you become part of their futures team or on their futures roster. So it's not the main board, but it's the kind of an up and coming board really. Just took a whim. I just went for the Lisa Pritchard Future competition, and the news came in, and I'm into the second year now of the representation with those guys. So competitions do work.
Yeah. Just to everyone, competitions and open calls, you keep going. If you don't get something, it doesn't, have the amount of things you probably, but you just got to keep going, don't you? You got to keep going. You find your path, and it's a good example of keeping on going.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. Do you want to add anything else at all, or is it, if anyone's got any more questions at all for Andy? Is there anything you'd like to add that we haven't kind of?
I'll give you a little sneak peek of the front cover. It's a very, very poor laser print, but I can show you what I'm aiming for with the cover. So I can show you that. So the light's getting pretty dark in here as well.
And my battery's going as well, and I realised I'm near a plug socket.
Okay, so I'll get a smaller one. So you've got to excuse the poor quality print here. Let me put it over here. But this was the cover design that we're going for. I've worked with a good friend of mine, Tommy Morrison. His company is Wild Ilk Design Studio, and I've worked with them before. A number of different sort of publications and things. But Tommy designed the cover for this, and we went for quite an unusual approach really. So it's kind of, that's the front cover there with the spine, and then we've got the title, The Flesh and the Fantasy, on the back, which is quite good. I think it works quite well, and the type design that he's given it is really, really quite cool. It's a kind of a mirrored typeset, and it's kind of got a little bit of a nod to the kind of the Western, sort of style font and typeface. And then the character at the front, we've got this kind of Uncle Sam character, which kind of bleeds over the spine and onto the back. So quite unusual. But I was, when we had initial conversations with one another about the cover, I think the book that we kept coming back to was this. We really liked this book by Vanessa Winship. She Danced on Jackson, and just how the kind of design went over for the front and the back, and the kind of the silhouette as well. So we were kind of aiming for that, and the size of the book as well. We're going for something around that size as well. So there you go.
Great.
It should look really cool.
Great.
The color of it is it's like a really dull gold, but there's an element of metallic in there, so it should be pretty cool. And then there's like the black and white print on the front. So it should be decent. Quite excited.
Great. Exciting times. I think that's everything from me, unless there's anything that you
good.
want to add. But I think the book's looking really exciting, and as I said, if people need to. We've got a question, another quick question from Charlie. What was the motivation for turning the work into a book as a method of showing the work? It's a good question.
Good question. Well, I've got you guys to thank. So, yeah, the book came out of, so I guess towards the end of the masterclass, you guys generously offered me the dummy book bursary. So really that gave me the ability to turn the work into, turn it into a book project really. So that in terms of its physical, its physicality, but the kind of the work was generated through the masterclass program. So it was kind of bringing the projects together and discussing it as a book project really. So, but yeah, no, thanks to you guys for the bursary for that. So
no, we're very we're very happy to support you, and the work speaks for itself. And as I was about to say, just if people haven't seen Andy's work in detail, I do encourage you to visit his website and also onto the East Meets West exhibition site, which I will just read out the title for, which is eastmeetswestphoto.co.uk. And I know we're just getting a few more questions here, so I'll just go back to them. And so one from Tom: how do you manage fitting your personal and commercial work around the technician work? And I'm just going to change seats so I can plug my phone to charge as well. I'm nervous.
That's good. So that could, well, I work part-time at Birmingham University. I 3 days there. So that gives me commercial work, my own work. Plug myself in as well because I'm about to die.
The conversation's just been too.
The university is pretty flexible.
Good.
Oh. Sorry, just gotta get. Let me get some light in here. There we go. Bit of a bodge job. So, I guess I work 3 days a week at the support technicians and staff to work, because if I'm bringing industry knowledge and experience into the university, then that's a plus for the students. And I have done in the past as well, like for my commercial jobs, I've hired students and had them on jobs with me. So it's a kind of a university, it's a kind of a feeds into one another really. So
definitely. And I think it's so good for the students. Oh, I think Andy's maybe frozen. Or have I frozen? Andy? Oh no. Oh, I think
sorry,
Evie. Oh, we're back. I think Evie. Yeah. One of us went then. But I was just going to say, I think it's so important for the students to have someone like you around, who's kind of making really strong contemporary work, and it's such, and to see you not only making your own personal work but the commercial stuff as well. And I think it's just a really good example to them, and also just shows, like, as a photographer, you've got to be doing so many, and an artist, you've got to be doing so many different things to kind of keep things going. But okay, let's just go back to some of the other questions. So from Jessica, how do you access the people you photograph for your project? So I know some of it's turning up to events that are taking place, but for perhaps some of the more longer term kind of engagements, you know, how do you go around accessing them? How do you develop those kind of relationships?
I think it varies really. I mean, it depends. So, for example, there's a guy I met. I mentioned him earlier, Brent, who I've started a new project. And I met this guy at Hell's Angels Festival, and you know, he really kind of, you know, to look at him visually, he looks like a really intimidating guy. But like as soon as I got up chatting to him, I could tell that he was actually really receptive, and he was really like, you know, an open character. So, you know, we just exchanged contact details. I made up some stuff on the spot about wanting to do a project. I don't think I really thought too much about it. I just knew there was something good and interesting there.
Yeah.
So, and then, you know, we've had just through Facebook, you know, we've been building the relationship, I guess, through that way. And then I've been up to stay at his place for a couple of occasions and have made work with him. And that work is really, I guess, on a, you know, it's quite a close project in the sense that I'm working with him quite closely.
Yeah.
There are other times when, you know, kind of just something happens on the street, or if I see, you know, if there's a really quick relationship there, there's an exchange, I make a photograph, you know, take their number or contact details and offer to send them the portrait, and then that's it, really. I may never ever see them or hear of them again. So I think for the longer term projects or characters that I want to be involved with, it's kind of like a sensitive, you know, you've got to be careful and respectful of who they are and kind of what, I think you've got to be clear with them as well, like what your intentions are. Like, you know, don't hide it from them, just be honest with them, really. So, yeah.
Great. And this is a good question and $1 million question and answer, perhaps. How do you plan to make the book? How do you plan to take the book to market? Which routes are you exploring? And where would you look to kind of sell it?
Yeah, good question. I'm going to start with, we've got the format portfolio reviews in a couple of weeks, so I'm going to start there. And I'm going to, yeah, sort of get the feedback from those guys. And I've got a couple of photo book dummy competitions in mind where I want to approach. And there's a couple of industry characters as well. So a couple of individuals that I want to approach with the work as well, just to get, you know, kind of the conversation going. So get the work in front of them and then just see where, you know, there is like any longevity, or, you know, it may be that the work actually doesn't get anywhere, you know. Yeah. I'm very much that. And I think that the photo book industry is, you know, it's quite hard to get involved with, I guess, and get stuff published. And I'm not sure there's like really that commercial, you know, decent commercial value, you know, photo book making. So it's not a commercial venture, really. That's not at the back of my mind. Really, it's about work out there in front of the right people. So through competitions and then through a couple of contacts which I've got. Yeah,
great. And as you said, you know, all these things, they just lead one thing to the other. And, you know, in a previous question, you know, this work you're making does inform your commercial work or the commercial work that you get. So all kind of like, you get paid back for things in different ways that you might not necessarily think are kind of the straightforward, oh, I've made a book and now I'm getting, you know, X back.
Yeah, like I do think that these, you know, things that I've worked on years ago, they've kind of found that, you know, even images which are in my commercial portfolio now, like they've found them to be part of that, you know, things that you do, you know, it's all about the long game, isn't it? Like it's about, you know, sort of sticking with things and just, it's about timing and the right people and, yeah, just getting the work out there really. Yeah.
Great, great. Does anyone have any more questions at all? And I'm glad we both managed to find a charger, because that was worrying me about 10 minutes ago. Just looking at it going down, I was like, oh no, this better not go off. But if no one has any more questions, might look to wrap it up there. Thanks everyone for joining us. Thanks of course to Andy for all your insight and sharing so much with us. And you know, I'm sure everyone is really excited to see how the book develops. Just to let everyone know, the next event in this program is on Thursday evening with Emily Jones, and she's a great photographer and artist, and she'll be in conversation with Neve from Format. So that should be a really great evening, and that will be at 8 o'clock. And then the rest of the events you can find out on the Instagram. And yeah, please visit the website that all the participants have created. Really strong work, and once again, genuinely one of the best things to work on as part of my role with Grain and seeing everyone's work develop. So yeah, is there anything else that's coming up? There's going to be a publication as well, isn't there, of everyone's work?
So the digital launch has just happened, so the website's out there. We've got all the talks and interviews are lined up, and yeah, we've got the printed publication. I think that's coming soon. So yeah, just keep watching on the social media streams, and yeah, big shout out to the East Meets West crew. Actually, they've done a lot of work behind the scenes on the publication, the website, the marketing side of things. So they've done a really great job. So big shout out to those guys.
Perfect. And Emily's just put in the website. But yeah, thanks again for everyone for joining us.
Everybody wants the cat.
Yeah, come on, get the cat. Just get the cat. It's a great cat.
I'll go get the loo. Hold on, people, it'll be worth it.
And just while we're here, there is a number of other Grain and Format events happening online, free events, and you can find them out. And there's the cat. What's the cat's name?
That was Percy. I don't know where Blue is. She's hiding out.
Perfect. All right. Well, Andy, have a nice evening.
Nice one. Thanks for listening, guys. Nice one.
Yeah.
Bye. Bye.
Cheers, guys. Thank you, everyone.